Apostate's Misery. The young man was popular with everyone in the village. He had the ability to control the wind and was often seen flying over rivers and valleys. He was a cheerful boy, though he always seemed to be troubled by something. Several years later, his father passed away. Before he died, he told his son about the young man's mother, whom his son had learned never to mention in his presence.
"Go to the place marked on the map,"
said his father. As if guided by a spirit, the young man took up his scythe and left, carried by the wind. How long had he been traveling? Over the forests, oceans and mountain ranges he flew. Exhausted and frail, he came at last to a village. The chief of the village welcomed the young man and told him that the scythe he was carrying had once belonged to the village. Just then, a beautiful woman entered the room. The young man knew at once that she was his mother. From that day forth, he helped keep peace between humans and wind spirits. The scythe was never used again. Falcon's Pinion. I awoke on a rainy day and looked up to see my brother still in the nest from whence I'd fallen. It was a small nest, and I'd guessed that it would only be a matter of time before something like this happened. I was only 2 months old. Well, that's life, I thought, just as my parents flew back. They looked down at me, but they began to feed my brothers. I tried chirping, but they ignored me. That's it for me, I suppose, I thought, when a lightning bolt struck the tree, setting it alight. I flapped my wings in a desperate attempt to get away. Once I'd scrambled to a safe distance, I turned to see the nest in flames, my brother's burning bodies illuminating the forest. You can never tell what's going to happen in life. Cowering there in the wet grass, a human who'd come to investigate the fire saw me and scooped me up. 1 year later, I was an adult Falcon and sat on his arm. He was middle-aged, poor, and drank a lot. That was all I knew about my savior. After 2 years together, we parted ways when my companion sold me to buy alcohol. The human who bought me butchered, cooked, and served me to another human whose belly I paused in en route to the privy. My feathers were used to decorate a spear, which was sold to a fool at an exorbitant price. What a ridiculous waste of money and life.
Ozymandias Might. This holy spear would demand to know if its owner was worthy of becoming a ruler. It had been passed down by a generation of soldiers who desired to rule. Long ago, one such soldier, who sought to rule above all, held this spear. The spear asked of its owner, "When should a ruler use force?" The soldier could not answer. He managed to conquer and rule a small kingdom with the power of the spear, but it was too weak to repel the invading army of a neighboring kingdom and fell within a decade. As the soldier's kingdom collapsed, one of his generals escaped with the spear, the invading army hot at his heels. They caught up with him soon enough, but just as they surrounded him, the spear asked the general the same question. He answered, "There are 7 circumstances. The first..." Before he could finish, the spear enveloped his body in lightning and slaughtered all of his assailants. Using the power of the spear, the general went on to become the emperor of a grand empire. It flourished for over 1,000 years. Robber King. At the end of a long battle, the rebel leader finally pierced the tyrannical king's heart with his spear. As he drew his last breath, the army of the revolution poured into the castle. Now the land would be free of corruption, and peace would return. The victorious rebel smiled at the thought, but his smile was short-lived. The last battle perplexed him. The king offered no resistance. It almost seemed as if he gave his life willingly. But would a corrupt king do that? While he pondered over this, his allies called to him to come to the dead king's chamber. There he found the princess, bound and gagged. His allies quickly explained that they had found her like this. Feeling rather bemused, he removed the gag and heard the truth. She had been taken hostage by a spy from a nearby land and used as leverage to force her father to sabotage his own kingdom. "He was no tyrant," she cried. Moving as if to free her from her bonds, the rebel drew his knife and then slit the princess's throat. Whether or not her father had been a tyrant did not matter now. All that mattered was that the angry masses had risen up to remove a corrupt king. The truth was buried with the princess's body, and her murderer was crowned that day. Sealspear, Calamitous dance. A master blacksmith, embittered by the gods' maltreatment of the world, vowed to forge a weapon with which to destroy them. The power of the seal negates the power of the gods, and the seal derives its power from the goddess. So the blacksmith sealed the power of the goddess into his creation. The goddess was a noble knight, determined to carry out her mission. She was a noble goddess. Sealed inside was light, the power to illuminate. Sorrowborn. There was a small pond near a small village. This pond was said to have been created by the tears of young lovers torn apart. One such lover, a boy left behind in the village when his lover's family moved away, longed to see the one he sighed for just once more. One day, a spirit of the pond appeared before the boy and made a wager. If the boy could bring back some spiderwort that only grows in the far northwest mountains, he would bring the girl back. The boy left the village in search of the spiderwort and found a village in the northern lands. There, he also found his lost lover. Reunited, the two lovers shed tears of joy. Sitting together in the small village, next to the small river, they talked until the sun set and made a solemn vow to marry each other. As night fell, the boy smiled contentedly, his dreams fulfilled. But it was only an illusion created by the treacherous fog of the forest. The boy died, alone, in the darkness. The spirit of the pond mourned for the boy's unrequited love. It sealed the lover's tears into this spear, praying for the happiness in the afterlife. Victor's spoils. Once there lived two princes. One studied the martial art of bravery, and the other studied the martial art of adaptability. The two trained constantly to refine each other's skills. The brothers asked their master, "Which school is more effective?" The master handed a spear to the brothers. Smiling, he explained, "A good spear has a hard, sharp blade and a staff as flexible as a willow. What matters is that two schools fight together, not against each other." The master eventually died of old age. The princes buried him with the spear that had taught them so much, vowing that they would work together for the rest of their lives. Their kingdom flourished. Widow's death. Neustria's king, Kilperic I, ended the long confrontation with Austrasia by agreeing to the marriage of his second son, Alfonstein, to Fompodel, the third daughter of Sigebert I, king of Austrasia. All was peaceful between Neustria and Austrasia until Sigebert I's heir, Almabar, missing since his tour of the western Gothic land of Ornotras, returned to claim the throne. Almabar killed his mother, Brunhilde, then confronted King Kilperic's widow, Fredegund, who had planned to assassinate him, and claimed that Fompodel and Alfonstein's marriage was illegitimate. He then declared war against Fredegund's eldest son, King Clotaire II of Neustria. The battle began in the northern Austrasian land of Weimar. Almabar led his Austrasian army to victory over the Neustrians. Fredegund was captured at the castle.
and executed by the same axe used to behead Brunhilde.
Tower of Warning. This spear belonged to a gentle and mild-mannered man. He lived in shame for a certain antisocial tendency, so he avoided the company of strangers and lived deep inside the forest with his brothers. He led a quiet life until one day the Empire attacked his land, slaughtered his brothers, and torched his house. In despair, he tried to commit suicide. But just as he was about to die, a malicious fairy came to him and forced him into a pact, saving his life. As the price of his pact, he lost his sight. But with his newfound power, he rose up against the Imperial forces and fought to save the world from the tyranny of the Empire. Alongside the voiceless savior, he prevented the end of the world. Though he was now a hero, his shameful tendencies remained, so he returned to his life of solitude, of vilified exile. Hanch's Spear. The chaser in the fortress city to the west was a master of his craft. The nobles had him decorate their armor. However, he wouldn't let anyone into his shop, and went out at night without telling a soul where he was going. In time, his wife grew suspicious and tried to follow him, but lost him in a cemetery near the outskirts of the city. One night, the chaser's wife decided to wait for her husband in the cemetery. Sure enough, the chaser arrived soon afterwards and began to dig up a freshly buried coffin. Horrified, his wife ran away without saying a word. Once she'd collected her thoughts, she decided that it was high time she had a look inside her husband's shop. What was there were corpses, dressed in armor and matching accessories, and her husband, dancing naked among them. The chaser had brought back dead bodies and clothed them in his richly decorated creations. Maddened by disgust and despair, she lunged at her husband, impaling herself and him on a spear held by one of the grotesque mannequins. Several days later, the couple was discovered, skewered together and surrounded by corpses. The offending spear, notable for its exquisite chasing, eventually found its way into the hands of Hanch.
Eris Spear. Once, there was a man called the Iron Dragon of the Two Swords, famed for his dignity and countless acts of heroism. The owner of this spear was a female knight who trained him. Whether because of its uncommon quality, or because it was a gift from Iron Dragon, she always left for battle with this spear in her hands. During a mission, she faced a terrible choice. Ordered to retreat, she stood between countless enemy troops and a defenseless village. Ignoring her orders, she stayed and fought to the death. The enemy paraded her violated remains, then burned the village to ash, while her former allies sullied her name with the charge of insubordination. When the Iron Dragon found out what had happened, he charged into enemy territory and retrieved his beloved mentor's remains and her spear. Cradling her broken body in his arms, he swore to win back her good name, to become as noble a knight as she had been, and to raise knights who would give their lives to protect the people. Eris inherited the spear, a memento of these two noble heroes. One can only wonder about what she thinks and for whom she fights, but the fallen knights can rest in peace, knowing that their magnanimity of spirit lives on in her.